I never thought I'd be the woman who throws away a 25-year marriage for another man. But here I am, broke, alone in a crappy apartment, and my kids barely talk to me anymore. I'm Eleanor, 46, and 3 years ago, I made what I thought was the bravest decision of my life, but it turned out to be the dumbest mistake ever. Arthur and I met in our 22nds at a company picnic. He worked in accounting. I was in customer relations. Back then, he was this confident guy with big dreams who made me laugh until my stomach hurt. We got married after dating for 2 years, had our first baby a year later, and before I knew it, we had 3 kids and a mortgage in the suburbs. But somewhere along the way, Arthur changed. Or maybe I just started seeing him differently. After 25 years of the same routine, him coming home, eating dinner, watching TV, then going to bed, I felt like I was suffocating. He stopped noticing me years ago. I'd get a new haircut, and he wouldn't even look up from his phone. I'd buy a new outfit, and he'd just ask how much it cost. Meanwhile, all my friends were posting about date nights and surprise gifts from their husbands. Not that Arthur was a bad guy. He paid the bills, never cheated, and showed up for the kids' events. But is that really all marriage is supposed to be? I started dreading coming home after work. Our house felt like a museum of a life I didn't choose anymore. All those family photos on the wall started to feel like they were mocking me, like they were showing some other woman's life, not mine. The kids were grown. Owen was 28 and living in Seattle. Lila was 26 and engaged, and Seth was 23 and finishing college. They didn't need me hovering around anymore, and Arthur and I barely talked about anything real. It was all just logistics. Who's picking up groceries? Did you pay the electric bill? The roof needs fixing. That's when I met Caleb at work. He transferred to our department from the main office. And right away, there was this energy between us. He'd stop by my desk to ask questions he definitely knew the answers to. He'd bring me coffee without asking, and remember exactly how I liked it. We started eating lunch together, and for the first time in forever, someone was actually listening to me. Caleb would look me in the eyes when I talked, not glance at his watch or phone like Arthur always did. I told myself we were just friends, but deep down I knew it was more. Caleb made me feel alive again, like I was desirable, interesting, worth paying attention to. He'd text me these sweet messages during the day asking how my meeting went or sending me a funny meme that reminded him of something I'd said. When was the last time Arthur had done anything like that? I honestly couldn't remember. I started making more effort with my appearance, buying new clothes, getting my hair done regularly, even losing those stubborn 15 pounds I'd been complaining about for years. Arthur barely noticed, just commented once that the credit card bill was higher than usual. But Caleb noticed everything. He'd compliment my earrings or say my hair looked pretty when I wore it down. Simple things that shouldn't have meant so much but did because I was so starved for that kind of attention. I started making excuses to work late just so Caleb and I could talk without coworkers around. We'd sit in the break room after everyone left and I'd tell him things I hadn't told anyone in years. My dreams of traveling that never happened, how I sometimes felt invisible in my own home, how I wondered if this was all life had for me. He'd share, too. His failed marriage, his hopes of starting over, how he'd never met someone he connected with like me. The first time he kissed me was after a company happy hour. We'd both had a couple of drinks, and he walked me to my car. I knew I should pull away, but I didn't want to. That kiss made me feel 20 years younger. I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling. When I walked in, Arthur was asleep on the couch, the TV still on. I stood there looking at him, thinking about how Caleb made me feel, versus the emptiness I felt looking at my husband of 25 years. That night, I slept in the guest room, claiming I didn't want to wake Arthur. It was the first of many lies. Our emotional affair turned physical a few weeks later. I told Arthur I was attending a work conference for the weekend, but I was really in a hotel downtown with Caleb. I should have felt guilty, but all I felt was relief, like I could finally breathe again. Caleb looked at me like I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. He couldn't keep his hands off me. He wanted to know everything about me. With him, I wasn't just somebody's wife or somebody's mom. I was Eleanor again. I started comparing everything Arthur did or didn't do to Caleb. Arthur's steady, predictable nature that once made me feel secure now seemed boring and passionless. His practical approach to everything felt stifling. Caleb was spontaneous, romantic, and made me feel like I was the center of his universe. I convinced myself that what Caleb and I had was real love. The kind people write songs about, and what Arthur and I had was just a comfortable habit. After 2 months of sneaking around, I couldn't take the double life anymore. I decided I deserved to be happy. Why should I settle for a lukewarm marriage when I could have passionate love? So I did what I never imagined I would do. I sat Arthur down and told him I wanted a divorce. The look on his face still haunts me sometimes. When I told Arthur I wanted out, he didn't even yell. He just sat there with this blank look, asking if there was someone else. I tried to be gentle about it, but I told him yes. I'd met someone who made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. He asked me if I would reconsider, try marriage counseling, take some time to think about our family, but my mind was made up. I told him I wasn't in love with him anymore and hadn't been for a long time. That part wasn't completely true. I just needed to say something that would make it easier to leave. Things got ugly after a weekend when I disappeared from Friday to Sunday with Caleb. I deserved that little getaway after all the stress. But when I came home to pack more clothes, Arthur completely lost it. He told me not to come back, that I could get my things another time. But the house wasn't my home anymore. I was shocked. After 25 years together, he was just throwing me out. But honestly, it made things easier. I moved in with Caleb that same day. I tried to keep things civil for the divorce. I wanted it done quickly so Caleb and I could start our new life together. So, I agreed to pretty much everything Arthur wanted. He kept the house, his entire pension, and most of his 401k. My friends told me I was being stupid, that I deserved half of everything after 25 years. But I didn't care about money then. Caleb made good money, and we were in love. Material things seemed so unimportant compared to finally being happy. The kids were another story. I wasn't prepared for how they would react. Owen, my oldest, told me he was done with me if I chose this guy over his dad. He actually used those words like Caleb was some random nobody. Lila cried and asked me how I could break up our family. Even Seth, who's always been my easygoing one, shut me out. I tried explaining that sometimes people grow apart, that I deserved happiness too. But they weren't hearing it. They'd always seen me as just their mom, not a woman with needs and desires. I figured they'd come around eventually once they saw how happy Caleb made me. The divorce was finalized in early 2022, and for a while, everything with Caleb was amazing. We took weekend trips, went out dancing, and stayed up talking about everything and nothing. Sex was incredible, passionate, and frequent like it hadn't been with Arthur in more than a decade. Caleb would surprise me with flowers for no reason. We'd take spontaneous days off work just to be together. He made me feel young again, desirable. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living instead of just existing. But around 4 months after the divorce, reality started creeping in. The first red flag was Caleb's drinking. During our affair, I'd only seen him have a few social drinks. Now I realized he drank every night, sometimes starting as soon as he got home from work. When I mentioned it, he'd get defensive, saying he worked hard and deserved to relax. The second issue was money. Caleb was always buying rounds for friends, ordering expensive electronics we didn't need, taking me to fancy restaurants multiple times a week. I started worrying about our finances, but when I brought it up, he accused me of being uptight like my ex. The breaking point came when I realized Caleb had been using my credit cards without asking. I confronted him about a $2,000 charge for a golf membership, and he exploded, saying I was controlling him, just like his ex-wife had. That night, he didn't come home until 3 a.m., stumbling and drunk and unapologetic. As I watched him pass out on our bed, still in his clothes, I had my first moment of doubt. This wasn't what I'd pictured when I'd blown up my life for him. Meanwhile, I was getting increasingly desperate about my relationship with my kids. Owen wouldn't take my calls at all. Lila would talk to me occasionally, but always ended our conversations upset. She told me Dad was healing and that everyone was worried about me. I hated that, the idea that I was someone to be worried about, like I'd lost my mind. Seth would respond to my texts with one-word answers, if at all. I missed them terribly, but I still believed they'd eventually accept Caleb and my new life. Then Arthur completely blindsided me. 6 months after our divorce, Lila let slip that he was dating someone. Some friend of his sister's, also divorced. I was shocked and, if I'm being honest, jealous. How could he move on so quickly when we'd been together for 25 years? I tried telling myself I didn't care. After all, I had Caleb, but it bothered me more than it should have. I kept picturing this woman in my house, using my kitchen, sleeping in what used to be my bed. The real blow came when Owen got engaged and I found out through Facebook. Not even a phone call. When I called to congratulate him, he told me bluntly that I wasn't invited to the wedding. I was devastated. I called Arthur, begging him to talk to our son, to make him understand that I was still his mother. Arthur just said, "This is between you and Owen. You made your choice, Eleanor." Then he hung up. I cried for days, but Caleb had little sympathy. He said my kids were adults being manipulated by their father, and I should just give them time. That's when things really started falling apart with Caleb. His drinking got worse. He totaled my car, driving home drunk from a golf outing with his buddies. Then I discovered he'd been dipping into my 401k money to cover his own credit card debt. When I confronted him, he promised to pay me back, swore he'd cut back on drinking, said he'd get help. I wanted to believe him because the alternative, admitting I'd made a catastrophic mistake, was too painful to face. But promises don't mean much from someone who can't even remember making them the next morning. Caleb's behavior became more erratic. He'd be loving one minute and cruel the next. My dream man was turning into a nightmare, and I had nowhere to turn. My friends from my married life had mostly sided with Arthur. My kids barely spoke to me. I was working extra hours to cover our expenses, since Caleb had been between jobs for 3 months. One night, after Caleb passed out on the couch, I sat alone in our small apartment bathroom and finally admitted the truth to myself. I had destroyed everything good in my life for a fantasy. The passionate, attentive man I'd fallen for didn't really exist. Or maybe he did, but only for as long as it took to lure me away from my family. Either way, I was trapped in a relationship with an alcoholic who was bleeding me dry financially and emotionally. In desperation, I called Arthur. It had been over a year since the divorce. I thought maybe time had softened his anger. I told him I'd made a terrible mistake and asked if I could come home. The silence on the other end of the line should have prepared me for what came next, but it didn't. Arthur unleashed 25 years of built-up rage. He told me exactly what he thought of me as a person, as a wife, as a mother. He said the house was no longer my home and never would be again. He told me to never contact him again. Then he hung up. I stayed with Caleb for another 6 months after that call, paralyzed by shame and the fear of being alone. But when he spent the last of my savings on a gambling trip with his friends, something in me finally snapped. I packed my things while he was at work and left. Now I'm living in a dingy one-bedroom apartment, driving a used car that breaks down weekly, and working a job I'm overqualified for just to make rent. My life has become unrecognizable. Last week, Lila told me that Owen and his wife are expecting a baby. I should be excited about becoming a grandmother, but all I feel is grief, knowing I probably won't be allowed to meet my own grandchild. I heard through mutual friends that Arthur and his girlfriend are planning a trip to Hawaii this summer, the trip he and I had always talked about taking once Seth finished college. Some days I tell myself it's not fair, that a mistake, even a huge one, shouldn't cost someone everything, that my kids should forgive me because I'm their mother, that Arthur should have fought harder for our marriage. But in my honest moments, usually late at night when I can't sleep, I know the truth. I didn't just make a mistake. I made a choice over and over again, day after day. I chose excitement over commitment, fantasy over reality, selfishness over family, and now I'm living with the consequences. Maybe someday my kids will forgive me. Maybe someday I'll forgive myself. But for now, all I can do is wake up each day in my empty apartment, go to my meaningless job, and wonder how I could have thrown away 25 years of love for something that turned out to be nothing but smoke and mirrors. I find myself staring at old family photos a lot these days. There's one from Seth's high school graduation that I keep on my nightstand. We're all smiling. Me, Arthur, and the kids. We looked so happy. Were we really, or was I already restless, already looking for an escape? I can't even remember anymore. The past has become a blur of contradictions. Was my marriage as empty as I convinced myself it was when I met Caleb? Or did I rewrite history to justify what I wanted to do? My therapist, yes. I finally started seeing one, says I was having a midlife crisis. That I was afraid of growing older, afraid of never feeling passion again, afraid of disappearing into the background of my own life. She's probably right, but knowing why I did what I did doesn't fix anything. Understanding doesn't bring my family back. Last month, I ran into Arthur at the grocery store. 3 years after our divorce, and my heart still jumped when I saw him. He looked good, better than I remembered. He'd lost weight, gotten a new haircut. He was with her, Brenda, his girlfriend. They were laughing about something when they turned down my aisle. The moment he saw me, his face changed. Not anger anymore. Just nothing. Like I was a stranger. He nodded politely and guided Brenda in the other direction. She looked back with curiosity. I wonder what he's told her about me. Probably everything. Probably the truth. Lila's wedding is next month. She invited me, which feels like more than I deserve. She made it clear that I'd be seated separately from the family, that I shouldn't bring a date, that I shouldn't expect to be in many photos. I agreed to all her terms immediately. I'd stand in the parking lot and watch through a window if that's what it took to see my daughter get married. Owen won't talk to me at the wedding, she warned, and I'll only see Seth at the reception. Arthur will be there with Brenda. I'll be alone. It's going to be awkward and painful and probably humiliating, but I'll be there with a smile on my face because what other choice do I have? Sometimes when I can't sleep, I play this game where I imagine what my life would be like if I'd never met Caleb. If I'd talked to Arthur about feeling unseen instead of looking for validation elsewhere. If I'd put that energy into rekindling what we had instead of burning it all down. I'd still be in my home. I'd be helping Lila plan her wedding. I'd be getting ready to be a grandmother with Arthur by my side. I'd have a financial future instead of being one car repair away from total disaster. I'd have my dignity. I'd have my family's respect. My mom used to say, "The grass is greener where you water it." I didn't understand that until it was too late. I was so sure the problem was Arthur, our marriage, our life. I convinced myself that Caleb was the solution when he was really just an escape. I didn't water my own grass. I jumped the fence for someone else's only to discover it was actually just dead weeds painted green. Caleb texted me last week, said he misses me, that he's getting help for his drinking, that he wants me back. I deleted the message without responding. Some lessons you only need to learn once, but it got me thinking about second chances. Arthur got one in a new relationship, a chance to do things differently. My kids are building their own lives. Even Caleb thinks he deserves another shot. What about me? Do I get a second chance? Or is this it? This small life in this small apartment, paying for my mistakes until the day I die. I've been thinking about moving, starting fresh somewhere new, maybe a different city where nobody knows me or what I did. It feels like running away. And maybe it is. But staying here, being reminded every day of what I lost, seeing Arthur move on while I'm stuck in this purgatory of my own making, it's slowly killing me. My sister thinks I should do it. She's the only family member who still talks to me regularly. She says time and distance might help heal the relationships with my kids, that they might be able to see me as a person again, not just the mom who broke their dad's heart. The thing about being the villain in your own story is that you don't realize it until it's too late to change the ending. When I was sneaking around with Caleb, lying to Arthur, dismissing my kids' feelings, I thought I was the hero. A woman brave enough to follow her heart, to choose passion over complacency. It's only now, alone with the consequences, that I see the truth. There's nothing brave about betraying the people who love you. There's nothing heroic about putting your desires above everyone else's needs. Some nights I dream about that moment, sitting Arthur down to tell him I wanted out. In the dream, I say something different. I tell him I'm unhappy, that I feel invisible, that I need more from our marriage. I ask for counseling instead of a divorce. I confess to inappropriate feelings for someone at work but say I want to recommit to us. And in the dream, Arthur reaches for my hand, tells me he's been taking me for granted, promises we'll find our way back to each other. I wake up from those dreams with wet cheeks, the ghost of relief and regret mingling in my chest. When I visit my therapist, she talks a lot about forgiveness. Forgiving Arthur, forgiving Caleb, forgiving myself. The first two feel possible eventually. The last one seems impossible. How do you forgive yourself for ruining your own life? For hurting the people you were supposed to protect? for throwing away something precious for something worthless. She says it starts with accepting that you're human, that humans make terrible mistakes, that making a bad choice doesn't make you a bad person. I'm not there yet. I think about calling Arthur sometimes, not to ask for another chance. I know that door is closed forever, but just to tell him I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not the manipulative apologies I tried in the beginning when I thought I could fix everything. I want to tell him that he deserved better than what I gave him, that he was a good husband, a good father, that the failure was mine, not his. But what right do I have to ask for that conversation, to put my need for absolution on him after everything else I've taken, so I don't call? Some messes can't be cleaned up. Some debts can't be repaid. Lila says the baby is due in October. A little boy, my first grandchild. She hasn't said whether I'll be allowed to meet him. I've started knitting a blanket just in case. Blue and white soft yarn that won't irritate newborn skin. I tangle the yarn at least once every session. Have to undo rows because I've miscounted stitches. But I keep going. It feels important somehow to make something with my hands for this new life that's coming, even if I might never get to give it to him. My therapist would probably call it a hope project. She'd be right. All I know for sure is that if I could go back, I'd do everything differently. Not just because I ended up alone and broke, though that's certainly part of it, but because I finally understand what I took for granted. What looked like a boring, predictable life was actually a foundation. Safety, stability, trust, the steady accumulation of memories and in-jokes and small kindnesses. The knowledge that someone will always be there, not because you make their heart race, but because they've chosen you day after day, year after year. That's the real love story, not Caleb and his empty passion. The real love was there all along, and I was too blind to see.